Alright guys, welcome back to Mr. Post Frame. Today is going to be part 5 of our in-floor heat video series, and we're going to talk about the cost breakdown of this system on my build in particularly. And we're going to base the cost of this off of today's prices versus when I did this pre-COVID, because prices have gone up and it has affected some of the materials in a pretty good way. So the prices you're going to see are based on today's prices, so that should be helpful. But before we get started, if you guys are looking to design a barndominium, shop, garage, whatever the case is, reach out to us. We can help you out with that. Reach out to design at Mr. Post Frame. Also, for you guys that want to self-build, we have a Patreon group that is just for self-builders. We answer your guys' questions. It's a great community of other self-builders. You get to share your build on the site, so it's pretty awesome. Check that out. But let's go ahead and jump into the cost breakdown of this system right here. So if you've watched the first 4 parts, you know how we got to this point. So I'm going to break this down into a couple different phases. Step 1 would be all of the below grade prep. And when we think about this, if you are going to live in a slab home, whether it's a post frame home, stick frame home, or you're going to have offices in a shop, you need to prepare underneath the slab the same way. And what I mean by that, you really should be putting insulation, and you definitely should be putting some form of vapor barrier. So with that being said, to prepare for your under slab to have radiant heat, the only thing you would need to add is the radiant heat tubing, which is typically 1/2 inch, 300-foot loops of oxygen barrier packs. So let's go ahead and break this down. So if you, in previous videos you saw we were using the pink board at that time. The pink board in today's prices, it covers 32 square feet and it runs about $56 a sheet. The thing you have to do prior to putting that down is you have to put at minimum a 6 mil vapor barrier. So for 20 foot wide by 100 foot 6 mil plastic, you're looking at $130. So for my build, it took 3 rolls, so that's 390 bucks. Since I've built this, we have built lots of barndominiums, shops for other people, and we have went to a different insulation. The insulation we now use is an EPS foam. It's called Hitz Halter, and we went to it for several reasons. One, I saw it, read up on it, and it has a lot of really good characteristics that make my job a lot easier. They give you a better performance and a cleaner install. So it has, one important thing about it is has a vapor barrier built into it on both sides. So you no longer have to take the time to put the plastic down. Your insulation board has that built into it. Secondly, it has terminicide in it, which is a insect killer. So especially termites, ants, things of that nature are killed by it if they start to try to burrow in it. Thirdly, it's got 6 inch, 12 inch, 18 inch, 24 inch grid lines. So when you're laying out your tubing and all of your rebar, it makes life a breeze. So you throw it down, tape the seams, and you're good to go. So it is a huge time saver. It does save on cost, which I'll share that with you in a minute. And you don't have to go to all the hassle of putting that vapor barrier down. So let's kind of talk about what this would cost the way I did it in today's world, and then what it would cost using the new insulation that we use. So doing my underslab prep the old way with 2-inch pink board, I would have needed 164 sheets, which are 32 square feet per sheet. The total for that was $9,826 in today's prices. I would need a minimum of a 6 mil vapor barrier, which is $390. So I have a total of $10,216, and that does include 2 feet of frost protection all the way around the building. Depending on where you live is going to depend on how far you go down. Most places 2 feet is going to be fine. And if you're in the south and you're thinking, well, I don't really need that, it also protects your slab from heat as well, because part of the reason that hydronic heat works so well is because concrete conducts heat and cold very well, so you don't want the sun bearing down on the side of your slab and transferring it into the house either. With the new Hitz Halter insulation that we use, the vapor barrier is built into it, It's 4 foot wide by 24 foot long fan fold, so there's also a big time saver in stretching that out 24 feet versus just 8 feet. And they cover, one piece covers 96 square feet, so I would need 54. That would include all my frost protection. And depending on where you are in the country, they're going to run somewhere around $140 for a sheet. That is going to maybe be a little bit lower, a little bit higher, depending on what shipping costs are. There's not a lot of places that carry this. However, we can order it in, and we are at $7,560. After that point, everything is typically the same. So if you take your square footage divided by 300, that's typically going to give you how many 300-foot loops you need. We used 17 half-inch loops in this build, and we buy Sioux Chief, Oxygen Barrier PEX pipe and 300-foot loops, and it runs about $115 per loop right now, which is $1,955. So that's going to be consistent whichever direction you go. That's going to be kind of a no-brainer. It is what it is. And then every 2 feet you need a staple, and so we needed 13 boxes of staples, and that came up to $442. So the grand total, the way I did this in my house, in today's prices, is $12,613. Using the Hitz Halter insulation that I use now, my grand total would be $10,597. So that's a $2,016 difference. So that's a substantial amount, at least in my mind. So there's a lot of benefits to the Hitz Halter. Not only can you get it for a cheaper price, but it speeds up the process and just simplifies it. With that being said, the only additional thing you would need to do to prepare for in-floor heat is add the tubing, which is $1,955. I broke that down per square foot. So that's an additional 43 cents a square foot in cost of what you would need to do to just be able to have the option at a later date. You can wait on all this stuff. This can wait for years if you want. But in order to have that option, you have to put the tubing in. So if you're trying to decide, hey, should I do this? Shouldn't I do this? It's 43 cents a square foot to add the tubing to have the option. We get tons of emails about people having buildings sweat, their concrete being wet, and that's because there's no vapor barrier. So you really, at bare minimum, need a vapor barrier. I highly recommend insulating under your slab. You'll have, if you insulate under your slab, insulate your walls, your building is probably never going to fall below freezing without any heat if you're using it as a garage or shop. So at that point, that's a pretty good deal to not have to run any heat and not have your building fall below freezing. So now that we've talked about the price, I remember when I did this, and it was probably only 4 years ago, I only paid $30 a sheet for the 2-inch polystyrene, and now it's almost double that. So you can see that prices have gone up substantially. But I would highly recommend, if you're going to do this, look into Hitz Halter. It saves you the hassle of putting the plastic down, all that kind of good stuff. But let's just talk about kind of the process under the slab. One thing you want to do when you're building is you want somebody to come in, if you're not doing it yourself, and prepare your site. You want a level building site with 4 to 6 inches of 3/4 inch to 1 inch rock down on your building pad. And you want that below your slab so that you have drainage, so that you can compact it and that you can have good results. If you don't do that, and say one end of your building is off 1 foot low, that's going to cost you a lot of extra money in gravel to get that up to grade. So keep that in mind. Once we have our columns up, our walls framed, our roof on, that's when we typically will put in our frost protection. We've got to the point where we found that it's most efficient to use a small excavator, unless you have a few guys. And a few guys, a smaller building, you can knock out easily in a day. But we've started to leave off our grade board, bring a small excavator in, dig our trenches, put our grade board on, put our frost protection down, attach it to our grade board, and backfill, and then we continue building. Then we'll get our interior grade perfect, and that's when we put all of our Hitz Halter insulation down and run our tubing. So with Hitz Halter, it's got the vapor built into both sides. So once you lay it down, the only thing you have to do is tape the seams. which I did include tape in my cost breakdown of that. The tape that I use is about $32 a roll. So on a project like this, it would cost me an additional $640 to tape all those seams. If you are going to go the vapor barrier and then the insulation, you should tape your seams on your vapor barrier, just so you can keep that moisture out. So keep that in mind. But so really, it's a pretty simple process. We'll put in our frost protection. Once the structure is complete, we'll do our underground plumbing, underground electric if there is any, put our insulation down, tape it, and then we run all our 300-foot loops. I personally do not get a layout for my loops. I look at our building, talk to the customer, hey, where do you want zones? And then we decide that, and then I make my route as I go. With the 6-inch grid lines on there, it's really easy to figure out where you need to go. I start on an outside wall, and I will go out, work my way back, and so I'm never crossing over. Any loops never cross each other. It's not the end of the world if they do. If you do have to cross them, it's just a much cleaner install if you start on one side and work your way across. I guess one thing to consider if you are doing this in your own, all of this insulation, regardless of what you use, is easily cut with a handsaw. I did buy the Malco foam board stapler, which I think it was like $250, and it's it is definitely paid for itself, and it's something that you could easily get rid of after you're done with your project. You're going to save so much more money that even if you kept it, it's not going to hurt you. So that is one specialty tool that you will need, is the Malco stapler to run your PEX tubing to your insulation. So one thing we'll do when we run all of our tubing is I will buy 1-inch EMT electrical conduit elbows, and then I run my loops through those, so where they're coming up in and out of the concrete, they're protected. So once I get that all done, I'll just fill the ends of those conduits with spray foam just to protect them, so no little rocks or anything like that can get down in there and over time wear holes. So that's pretty much all there is to it. It's a very, in my opinion, a very DIY friendly project to do. Most of the time I can lay all the insulation in a building in one day, the tubing in another day, so it's not a real time consuming thing either. Alright, so step 2 is going to be after your slab is in and you want to get the system up and running. So what I consider step 2 is all of the circulators, zoning, manifolds, boiler, all that kind of good stuff. This is all of the really expensive stuff that can be added anytime as long as you do the underslab prep. So as far as our build is concerned, we have 4,544 square feet that we heat, and that includes 4 zones. One in the garage. We have a storm shelter room in our garage that I put a loop in there, and then we have 2 zones in our house. One zone in our house is our master suite, and then one zone is our main living quarter. I will tell you this, in all of the years that we've been here, I've never ran the 2 zones in the house at a different temperature. If I had to do it over again, I wouldn't even make them separate zones, because it's not like a heated floor that you put in like a bathroom under tile floor where you really crank up the heat. It's a very, I will typically set my floor somewhere between 65 and 68 degrees in the winter, and that's what I leave it at, and it heats all the walls, all the furniture, everything up to that temperature, and it's a very consistent feel. And I've just never ever had them on a separate temperature, and I don't foresee ever doing that. For each zone, you'll need a thermostat. There's a wide variety of thermostats. We use real basic thermostats that you can either run the system off of an air sensor, a floor sensor, or a combination of both. I have found that I only use the floor sensors, and here's a couple reasons why. One is, take the garage for example. If I was running it off an air sensor, you open the garage door to pull in, cold air is going to come in and it's going to kick the system on when the floor really hasn't changed temperature. The reason it's so efficient is because it takes a lot to change the heat, the temperature of the concrete. So opening the garage door for 30 seconds while you pull in and shut it is not going to reduce the temperature in the slab enough to kick it on. So that's why we run floor sensors on our thermostats, and pretty much solely. You come in, close the door, 5 minutes later it feels 65 again. Same thing in the house, got the kids going in and out. You're not tripping your system on and using gas unnecessarily. So that's typically what we do in all of our systems, is run all of them on the floor sensor. The floor sensors I install after the slab, typically underneath the thermostat. I'll drill a hole in the concrete and set the thermostat down in the concrete slab and make sure it's sealed in there. As far as cost goes, everything you see behind me, so I have an MTI 199 boiler. It's a gas boiler. We run off of propane. And then all of my controls, so I have all my zone circulators, I have all of my valves, I have all of my manifolds, my control box. All of this stuff ran me, let's see, $9,450, and the boiler today is running about $3,700. So that may seem like a ton of money, which it is, but that's why I always say you can always add this stuff later. Oh, one thing to note about the boiler is you could also use this to heat your potable water in your house. So if you wanted to use it for your showers, all that kind of stuff, it can separate those two things on their own, and you can get multiple uses out of one boiler. I chose to separate mine, so this boiler is just for my in-floor heat system. As far as a couple things that I got a little bit nicer on mine are the Ryu manifolds. They have flow meters on them, and the reason I chose to do flow meters is so I didn't have to pay as much attention on my loop length. You want to keep your loop length pretty close if you're not going to be able to have, if you're not going to have flow meters on them, because for example, if you have a 300-foot loop and then you have a 250-foot loop and they're both running the same amount of liquid through them, the shorter loop is going to get hotter because it's shorter, so it's going to be putting out more BTUs. So with the flow meters, you can adjust those down to the exact same flow rate. These run about 3/4 of a gallon per minute through each loop is what I have them set at. As a side note, we've kind of figured out over all of these that we've done, if you're going to add a zone, it roughly adds around $1,000 of cost, because you have extra thermostat, you have extra circulator, extra valves, extra manifolds, which usually comes out to somewhere around $1,000 per zone extra. All right, so step 2 was our boiler controls, which were $9,450. Doing it the old way, the grand total was $22,063. The new way, using Hitz Halter insulation, it would be $20,047. And that's for heating 4,544 square feet. So if we break it down per square foot, the old way, it's about $4.85 a square foot, and the new way is $4.41 a square foot. So hopefully that gives you an idea, depending on which way you want to do it. I did this all myself, so I didn't have to pay labor, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, if you have to pay labor and all that, the price is going to definitely go up drastically, but I feel like this is something that you could very, very easily do on your own. I did a 2,200 square foot house that was, the controls were $3.18 a square foot. I did a 1,200 square foot shop that ended up being $3.50 a square foot. So you can see, the smaller the building, the more that price per square foot is, and that's just because boilers are boilers, manifolds are manifolds, so you're going to have that kind of just like that starting price, and the more square foot you have, it's going to start lowering the overall cost. So that's just to give you a couple examples of what all of these controls will cost. That's why it's always a good solution if you get all your loops in and then save up the money and then put in this system. I know somebody's going to ask, how much does this system cost you to run? And I don't have specifics, but I can tell you we have the gas boiler here for our in-floor heat. We have our stove is gas. We have 2 water heaters that are gas. We're heating we heat all of our square footage. So it's actually 4,000 square feet in the house and 2,500 square feet in the garage that we heat with our radiant heat at minimum 65 during the winter. And we use about 700 gallons of propane a year. As far as electricity, it's very minimal. It doesn't take a lot of electricity to run the circulators, to run the system. It's just the LP. So on a house this size, it really is very affordable and very, very comfortable and efficient. All right, so I know there's going to be a couple questions. Where did I get mine? Where should you get yours? And that's a really tough question. I don't really have a radiant heat partner at this point. I have bought systems from Radiant Tech before, and I've had good luck with them. They're a little bit lower price point. I don't like their manifolds and stuff like that because they don't have flow meters on there. So those are some things you might want to do. You might want to upgrade manifolds if you go with them. Find somebody local is probably a good option. Ask around, hey, do you know anybody? A lot of HVAC companies will offer hydronic heating, so that's a good place to start. I wish I had a better answer for you. I've wanted to start my own line. I just haven't had the time. Next question I know I'm going to answer is, how do you size your system? How do you figure out your loop layout? Well, we have videos on how we lay out our loops, but there's a couple programs that you can use. One is LoopCAD. If you're just doing it for your own personal use, LoopCAD is a good program. You can go on there, you can design, you can put your building size in there, you can even put zones in there, and it'll give you a loop layout, all that. It's either free or it's a very minimal one-time use cost. Second place, I did a lot of training on Taco's website. They have a free hydronic, you just have to sign up and you can take a free hydronic course at your own pace. It's kind of dry, but the information in there is really good. It talks about how to calculate how many BTUs you need, heat loss, all the things that go into designing your system. But I can tell you, if you're building post frame, if you use R10 below your slab, frost protection, we do 3-inch spray foam in all of our walls, and we do somewhere between an R40 and R60 in all our ceilings. Half-inch loops, 300-foot loops, you're going to have a really, really, really efficient house. If you guys have been following us, you know how many windows we have, and this system really does a good job keeping our home warm at a really low cost. So those are just a couple programs you can go on and kind of mess around with. If you don't know a ton about it, you should probably do the Taco training to kind of educate yourself a little bit. Otherwise, you might be a little bit confused. But those are a couple solutions to your problem until Mr. Postframe starts his own hydronic heating bingles, and I'm not sure when that'll be. Another question I know I'm going to get is, how do you know what temperature to heat your system with? So I run mine in around 116 degrees. That's what it will heat the water, and it's really easy to adjust that. So say your system's been dead all summer and you want to start it up and you want it to heat up a little bit quicker, because it does take several hours. I would say that's the only downside to hydronic heating. It's not a quick turnaround one way or the other, whether you want to heat your slab up or cool it down. It takes a couple days. You can turn it up to 120. That will get the floors up to temperature a little bit quicker. But I have really good success running mine around 116 degrees during the winter. Another question that I know I'm going to get is, do you run water, glycol, or what do you do? My whole system has water in it. And the reason I chose water is because, one, water is easier to move, it's easier to heat, it carries the heat better, and I don't have any intentions of not heating my garage or my house. This is my primary residence. I'm here all the time, so if there was to be an issue, it's something that I could take care of before there was any freezing occurring. Inside the building, the chance of any of this freezing is pretty slim to non-existent. If it's a place where maybe you have a shop or a garage, you're unsure whether you're going to heat it, I would put the glycol mix in there. It comes pre-mixed. You can get it 5-gallon buckets. It is pretty expensive, but when you're putting it in, you'll see how it's a little bit thicker. So it's a little bit takes a little bit more energy to push it. Takes a little bit more energy to get it heated up, and so it does cost a little bit more. But you do have that peace of mind that it's never going to freeze if you don't run it, if you don't use it. If it's somewhere, maybe it's a secondary home, cabin, something like that, where you're not going to be there all the time. What I found with my house is I wasn't sure temperature I was going to keep my garage at. I was thinking as low as possible, 40 degrees, just to keep it running, keep it from freezing. But I found that the cost was so minimal to keep it to keep it up to temperature that I run my garage at 65 degrees all winter long, and I don't notice any different in my bill. It's very efficient, and it's nice having a 65-degree garage. Come in with a snow-covered car next morning, car's dry, floor's dry. So it's just a nice thing to do. So I will tell you, I think you'll be surprised at the cost that it takes you to heat your floors. From my experience, gas boilers are much more efficient and better suited for larger spaces than electric boilers. The electric boilers, I did put one in a small building, and it just costs more to run that. And that's going to be dependent too on what you're paying for your electrician in your area. Maybe you have really low electric, maybe you produce your own electric. Whatever the case is, that's a decision you have to make. But I will tell you, from my experience, that gas boilers are the way to go. They're much more efficient and cheaper to run. Alright guys, so hopefully this video was helpful in kind of giving you a price per square foot for the different phases and total, to kind of give you an idea of what it's going to cost you. We appreciate you watching. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, share us with your friends, and we will catch you on the next video.